I'm mostly talking about NGOs which work in development or international third world oriented. Basically, there's a political economy of the NGO. The NGO is a government, mostly government-funded organization which has to produce legitimacy with respect to basically neoliberal governments in the West, also to a public which is composed of those who have much money by people who believe in neoliberalism. That means that the NGO in its funding strategy will not have a very revolutionary position. The NGOs, if you look at what they are publishing, the NGOs are basically publishing on project success, not on a structural transformation. That has also something to do with the fact that the management of NGOs is oriented to projects. NGOs are not large enough to engage in changes, but they are also normally not disposed to help governments who would change. If my argument is correct, that development is basically a question of how empower poor people and orient the production apparatus that you can afford to empower them, because you can supply the goods which they would use if they have some purchasing power. This is a point which is relatively far away of the NGOs. So the NGO will do something which the NGO can sell to the people who fund it. And the NGO will be somebody who looks for an NGO in those countries who produces, in association with the international NGO, these things which can be sold. The things which can be sold are basically determined by the shape of the values. If the value is not a revolutionary change of the structure of the society, but the value is some sort of humanitarian improvement, then you have to produce some sort of humanitarian improvement. The target group will comply like anybody else who is a client to a more powerful, more resourceful person. The NGO basically is interested in getting arguments for getting more funds. So the NGO is interested in the smile of the people who are its target group. That's what I'm saying. The NGO will provide the smile of the target group, what I call an export of certificates of good conscience. They create certificates of good conscience with the help of the target group, and they will bring these certificates of good conscience to the Western donors, and they will get the money. And that is exactly such a process where the presentation matters more than the real success. The NGO controls a chain of information in order that the interpretation of the smiling children serves what the NGO wants to achieve. And therefore, the NGO will do this. It has also naturally an own origin. As the NGO is a middle-class organization, it will have an approach to social problems which is not so different from the Salvation Army, because that is the effect of the church, and I will not insist on self-organization of these groups, of changing the social structure, of having conflict. Sometimes for changing the social structure you have to disempower the middle class, and that is not what the middle class in the West and the middle class in the Southeast. And the best thing transaction cost-wise for NGO is to have a portfolio of such projects which produce it, and not to have to look for too many new ones, because that's costly to start new ones. So you will have a very high share also in development assistance of projects which are set to work very nicely, but which are not completed. Because transaction cost-wise, this is the cheapest solution. So you will have some sort of permanent well digging someplace. Somebody who knows how to dig wells. He will now look only for new villages who could have still another well. The question which you can now see is, are there alternative forces? There are many reports now about real civil society in the South, which is really hampered by the NGO, because the NGO wants to occupy the scarce space of civil society. For example, take one case where it's most visible. The most efficient organizers of civil society in the Muslim world are the Islamists. They are making hospitals, schools, etc. The NGOs have no hold over this civil society. They cannot use it as a basis of their own reproduction. Therefore, you have a very strong opposition of all NGOs against the Islamists. Now, the NGOs will say probably, because the Islamists are so bad, so killing and women and vice. Same thing in Buddhist countries. There is a very nice report on Sri Lanka where it's the same thing. The real force of contesting the actual system, although it's also on the leadership of the middle class in the South, are no longer secular organizations. The secular organizations have lost. The word socialism in Arabic is no longer positively related in, for example, Algeria. The poor have gone back to moral economy. Moral economy is the thing which is the Islamists and Muslim countries, which is the Hinduist party. The NGOs are totally disconnected to these things. For example, I remember when I first came into contact with the Hinduist party, the BJP in India, the European community and their Indian counterparts in the Indian NGO scene were so much criticizing even of talking with them. But they were doing the things, if you look in the party organization of the BJP in India, it's much more diverse than the Congress party organization, because the only way of mobilizing votes in India was to serve the poor. For example, legal counseling. There are a lot of land questions for the poor farmers in India. That was the BJP which was pushing the legal counsel. They were providing the legal counseling to them, and could do many others, health questions in Islamic countries and so on. The NGOs, I do not see them having that.